The reminder hit my phone at 6:12 a.m. 3 sharp vibrations in a subject line that did not belong to my life. Confirmation for nose first cleaning at Bright Wave Pediatric Dentistry. Insurance on file under my name. I lay in the grey half-light, watching the blue glow soak into the ceiling, and calculated how many ways a simple email could blow my marriage apart by dusk. I could have ignored it. I could have deleted it, rolled onto my side, nudged my wife, and asked about oatmeal or the drip in the bathroom sink. Instead, I locked my jaw, saved the email to a folder I had never used, and sat in the kitchen with the coffee dripping like a metronome. The subject line repeated in the notification badge as if the clinic wanted to make sure I did not miss the appointment I had never made for a child I did not have. By 7, the morning had slotted into the routine that usually calmed me. I live on the east side of Relford, a mid-sized city that pretends it is still a small town because the river bends like a friendly arm around downtown. My office sits at the Water Bureau on Glendale Avenue, a boxy concrete building across from a hardware store with a faded sign that has sold the same brand of screws since the 70s. The commute tracks past the dog park, then the Good Bean on Laurier, then the curve where the river widens and the old ferry pilings lean like crooked teeth. I usually notice if the pilings have shifted after a storm. That morning I washed only my knuckles. Mara left before me, claiming an early meeting. She works nights and weekends as a supervisor at Trident Logistics, the big distribution hub off the 41. Trident runs 24 hours, never really sleeps, and hands out overtime like candy to anyone willing to stay past the sun. The early meeting did not exist on her calendar. I knew because I had watched her flick her phone upside down when the alarm had gone off and then slide it into her hoodie pocket like it might burn her if she looked at it too long. That detail made a small chalk mark on an internal scorecard I had been pretending not to keep. I answered a few emails. I watched the dashboard for the telemetry we used to predict water main breaks, the kind of math that let me feel competent in a way love never has. The real work of the day arrived under the sterile subject line again. 10 minutes before lunch, the clinic followed up with a friendly reminder to bring the dental insurance card, a consent to treat, and a favor to if the child was nervous. I could smell the sterilized cotton swabs through the screen. I clicked the number. I told myself I was calling to correct a clerical error. I used the voice I use when I correct addresses on incoming utility checks. I gave my name and spelled it twice and said there must be someone else with the same name. The receptionist made the kind of sympathetic sound people make when they are about to tell you something awful but procedural. The dependent listed was Noah, age 2 years and 7 months. The primary member was me. The secondary contact was Mara. I asked if I could bring the card to fix it in person. The receptionist suggested I come early. Parking fills fast on parents' afternoons. I had planned to eat the leftover chicken from last night's dinner at my desk between spreadsheets and a call with a contractor who always padded his bids. Instead, I stared at the chicken until the fat congealed, then put it back in the fridge. The fridge door handle left a crescent of cold on my palm. The overhead fluorescents hummed like they could feel my pulse. People like me preferred it to suspicion, so I took inventory. Our joint checking account, held at Portview Credit Union, showed a recurring ACH to Bright Wave Pediatric Dentistry every 6 months for a small amount labelled membership plan. I scrolled. The first one had hit 18 months ago. There were other transactions I had let slip past the cracks of trust because I had wanted to be the kind of husband who did not itemize his wife's life. Little things with careful names: Pine Hollow Learning Centre, Parkline Suites, Clara's Sitters. The pattern was as tidy as a ledger. The appointment sat at 3:30 p.m. I finished my shift at 3, signed out, and slid a manila folder into my backpack. It held printed statements, screenshots of the ACHs, a photo I did not remember ever taking of the two of us outside the DMV in winter, and the reminder email with a cheery clip art of a smiling cartoon tooth. Bright Wave occupies a suite in a new build whose glass reflects the loop of the river. The waiting room has a Pacific aquarium that runs the length of the back wall, the kind that holds low, flashing fish and a resin pirate ship with a hole in the side. The filter makes a soft bubble like a distant faucet that will not quite turn off. A couple of kids dried wooden trains across a bead maze while a mom in yoga pants scrolled on her phone. I stood near the check-in tablet and watched toddlers push their fingers on sea creature stickers. I told the receptionist my name and held out my card. She looked up, professional brightness at 70%, and asked if Noah was with me. I said no. I said I was here to fix a mistake. She typed. She frowned a polite frown. She slid a laminated sheet toward me that had the dependent's name and date of birth and my address and a square for signature that could not possibly be mine but looked convincingly enough like it that my stomach went cold. I was still holding the laminated sheet when Mara walked in with a little boy on her hip. He wore a mustard yellow sweatshirt with a small embroidered dinosaur over the heart and navy sweatpants with the knees stained a shade darker. His hair was a colour between sand and wheat. He had those bruised blue under eye circles kids get when they nap at odd times. He reached for a basket of mini toothpaste tubes like he knew where they were without being told. Mara did not see me first. She saw the receptionist, then the tablet, then me. She flinched the way a person flinches when a mirror shows them a stranger. I need to be careful here, because it would be easy to turn this into a cartoon. My wife, the villain. Me, the saint. It would be inaccurate and easy. Instead, I will say the seconds stretched long enough for me to catalogue what I already knew. What my body had known since the early meeting lie. The child had Mara's mouth. He had her grandmother's ears, the ones that fold a little at the top like a paper airplane wing. He rested his cheek on a spot on her shoulder where one of my old T-shirts had once frayed from being washed too much. I remember all the witnesses because the memory will not let me erase them even if I wanted to. The yoga pants mom, who looked up and then back down, then up again. The receptionist, whose brightness dimmed, then rose obediently. A dad in a work polo with a company logo for an 8-track service who made himself suddenly fascinated by the fish pretending not to hear. The fish themselves, unbothered, slipping in and out of the castle hole like they had appointments that mattered more than my life on the floor. Mara walked up to me like walking was one option among many and not the only option that would keep her upright. She did not take my arm. She did not reach for my hand. She stood near me, but not enough for us to be we. She set the child down and he made a noise that sounded like the beginning of a word, and I understood that the quiet hum of the aquarium would be the sound that haunted me later. I presented my folder. I showed the receptionist the ACHs, the membership draft dates, the dependent enrollment. I used the voice people use when they want to keep the car from sliding off ice. The receptionist nodded and wrote things on a pad and circled a number for the insurance line and slid a form across the desk with a section labelled suspected fraud. I filled it out with my full legal name and date and time. I included details I would not have included if I had been writing a letter to my wife. The boy tugged at a beaded wire and watched a wooden ladybug slide. He had a tiny, pale birthmark under his ear shaped like a comma. The receptionist asked if I wanted to wait. I said I did not, then I sat anyway in a chair near a plastic fern. Mara went back with the hygienist. I watched the fish and thought about all the houses in our neighbourhood with the same floor plan. The same corner kitchen and the same hall closet that never quite fit the vacuum. I thought about our hall closet. Last week I had reached for the vacuum and knocked over a canvas tote that smelled like talc. The tote had held a spare roll of diaper sacks I had told myself belonged to the neighbour's baby, who I visited once. I was good at telling myself stories small enough to carry. The cleaning took 31 minutes. 31 minutes in which I could hear the squeak of rubber soles on polished floor and the soft chatter of hygienists praising brave children. Every 5 minutes the little boy looked toward the door like a tag going out and back in. When they came out, he had a sticker that said I was brave and a plastic ring in glittered blue. He held it up toward me as if it were a peace offering from a stubborn country. I told the receptionist I would call the insurance. At the curb, I called Portview Credit Union instead. I made the voice flat. I asked to freeze the joint card that pointed me here and open a separate checking in my name only. The woman gave me a list of what she would need and a case number for the fraud report. PV-643,120. I wrote it on the back of the pediatric appointment card like it was a second address. When I got home, the house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and the unique emptiness that lingers right after an argument, the argument we had not yet had. I sat on the bottom stair, where the wood dips in a shallow groove from years of shoes. I thought of saying nothing, of placing the plastic ring on the kitchen counter beside the bowl where we toss our keys, of making dinner and sliding into a life where I understood that parts of my marriage were like city pipes, silently leaking, still technically functioning. I could not make that math work, not anymore. I went through our mail, the stack that travelled from mailbox to kitchen counter to dining room table and back again like a lazy river. Beneath a catalogue and a property tax bill was an envelope from Trident Logistics, her employer. Inside lay a summary of benefits changed from 18 months earlier. It thanked me for adding a dependent. The signature on the line for employee was narrow and sounded like Mara's when she was filling out forms quickly. The signature in the box for spouse consent was mine, except it was not. It had the loop of my LS and the lazy cross on my TS and the hesitation I recognized because I often hesitate over official lines. I thought about how someone could learn your signature by making lunches beside you for years. You would expect that this would be the moment when I lost the thread, when I opened kitchen drawers and slammed them or put a dent in a drywall corner. Instead, I pulled out a legal pad and made columns. Unknown charges. Repeat vendors. Dates. The neatness felt like a small raft. Shredded logs over time by bad in records. I had never seen them. A login for my spouse's personnel portal had never occurred to me until that morning. It took 8 guesses to remember the security question answers, the kind used for online forums, the kind we created together when we still thought we would use joint email. In night she allegedly worked a double shift last September. Her badge had pinged out at 6:04 p.m. and pinged in again at 4:38 a.m., which would have been a reasonable pattern if she were a ghost. On that night alone, we had a $79 charge at Parkline Suites, 2 miles south of Trident. The suite charges often lined up with early meetings. With nights she swore she had slept in the break room because the floors were short-staffed again. I mapped the charges against my calendar, against the weather, against that weekend we drove to see her aunt 2 towns over and stopped for barbecue at a place with the pig logo. The overlaps came out in dark ink, unambiguous as floodlines. I told myself to pace together, to be precise. I called the insurance company. They recorded my report and issued a separate case number for suspected dependent misrepresentation. VWL-20 2097. The woman on the line spoke in the kind of measured cadence that belongs to people who talk about bad news all day. She asked if I wanted to remove the dependent right away. My chest did something complicated around my sternum. I asked for 5 days to decide. She made a note. She told me the claims for dental cleanings had been small. She told me pediatric urgent care had processed a visit for a rash last spring. I held on to the word rash because it felt small and human. She told me that falsifying dependent status could be referred to the state. I wrote state referral next to the case number and underlined it twice. Because every story like this involves a storage unit, I found one. The email that morning had listed park-based storage in the footer, an innocuous detail about validation for the parents at Bright Wave. Park Bay sat behind a chain link fence off Merton Road, a road where the weeds grow tall and the power lines buzz. The manager, a woman with a braid wound like a crown, looked up my name and smiled like she had met me before. She slid a clipboard to Senegate Pass. My hand hovered. Unit 214 smelled like talc and cardboard. There was a pack and play folded neatly with its instruction manual strapped to the side with a hair tie like a courtesy reminder. 2 plastic bins labelled sizes with masking tape and a marker, 12 months, 18 months. A stack of Pampers boxes with dates scribbled on the side as if someone had planned consumption the way a person plans pantry staples. At the back, a banker's box held a thick folder. The top paper was a birth certificate from the county hospital. The mother was listed as Mara, with her maiden name. No father listed. The emergency contact was the same phone number as the SIM card sitting in an envelope taped to the inside of the box. I sat cross-legged on the cold concrete and watched us wander in the slant of light near the door. A Unit 2 doors down clanged, and a man in a ball cap tried a duffel out to a trot. My hand shook in a way I would have found theatrical if it were someone else. I told myself to take photos, which I did, slowly, as if the recorder on my phone might change the truth if I moved fast. The next twist arrived before I made it to my car. My neighbour, the one in the corner house with the hydrangeas, texted me a photo and typed a question I wish I had asked myself months ago. Did you want me to bring the little one over for the sitter this afternoon like you mentioned last week? Or is he with you already? The photo showed Mara walking down our driveway at 7:40 a.m. The week before, with a boy zip snug in a hoodie, his cheek pressed to her collarbone. The hydrangea lady's lens did an unkind thing to my face when I assumed she had caught me at the edge of the frame, stepping inside to grab my badge lanyard. I had never noticed the car seat base in the back seat of Mara's Corolla because it had been hidden under a folded blanket. Or I had noticed and filed it under friends. I called the neighbour. She answered. She is not a close friend. not someone who likes to get involved, but she is kind and she has eyes. She said Mara had asked her twice to cover an hour in the mornings because the sitter's schedule had shifted, and she had happily taken the little one inside for juice and those paint with water books her grandchildren liked when they visited. She had assumed, like neighbours do, that she was helping a situation fully known. She sounded mortified to have become an independent witness without trying. I told her she had done nothing wrong and that I appreciated the truth. I asked if the child had a favourite cup. She said the blue one with the rocket ship. Details pin a story to the earth, and the rocket ship stuck its little fins in and refused to budge. I did not confront Mara that night. She came home late, smelling not like our laundry soap, but like the faint medicinal scent of hand sanitizer and the sugar of a toddler's cereal. She set her keys in a bowl and looked at me like a person standing at the edge of a swimming pool about to step into cold water. I said I would prefer to talk when I had collected what I needed to say. This was not strategy. This was self-preservation measured in hours and heartbeats. The public seemed bright that it would be a family dinner or a Christmas gathering, but mine came as a human resources meeting in the beige conference room at Trident with the fruit tray sweating on the table. I arranged it because my manager insisted I document my spouse's employer's involvement in the dependent enrollment. I had no appetite for theatre. I brought my folder. HR brought a binder. Mara brought the kind of smile you wear when you borrow one from a photograph. I presented. I flipped open to the benefit change summary, the copy of the card, the half-dozen ACHs to daycare and dental, the badge records. The HR rep did not need me to underline. She held a sheet over mine and compared dates with the dispassion of someone who knows there is only one road to follow once the arrows line up. She explained in measured voice that misrepresentation on benefits can be grounds for termination of coverage and employment. She looked at me when she said it, which felt kind and cruel in equal parts. Mara tried, there in that room, to shoe this into a shape that looked like kindness. She said the child belonged to a friend who worked odd hours and had no coverage and needed someone to list him temporarily. She said in a tone designed to disarm that it was only dental and a rash. She said I would have done the same if I had half a heart. The HR rep looked at me and back at her and then pulled out a second folder I had not known existed. In it, there was a copy of a notarized letter of guardianship that looked to be legitimate and dated a year ago. The letter named Mara as temporary guardian. The signature for the friend's name was neat. The notary seal belonged to a woman whose office sits next to my bank. I called the notary later. She remembered both women. She said they had come in with a toddler who clung to his mother's sweater. She told me the mother had presented her ID as Tessa Keating. The last name pulled a thread I had not thought to pull. Keating. A man named Gabriel Keating had once trained Mara during her first summer at Trident. He had transferred to a different shift a year later. I remembered because he had given us a roasted chicken when my ankle surgery laid me up for 6 weeks, and I had not known how to thank him without sounding like I was thanking him too much. I found Gabriel on LinkedIn. His profile said he still worked at Trident. His photo showed him holding a toddler in a mustard sweatshirt with a small embroidered dinosaur over the heart. The background blur could have been a park or a parade. I told myself it could be anybody's toddler in any dinosaur sweatshirt in any Midwestern city with the same big box store stock of children's clothes. At this point, every story like mine follows the same fork in the trail. The spouse denies. The spouse swears. The spouse flips the board. Gaslighting is a word people wield too easily, but it fits what happened next like a key. Mara told me I was making a spreadsheet out of something that asked for prayer. She told me she had taken in a child because the child's mother had slipped into something she could not climb out of, and she had not had the words to explain it. She told me that if I press, I would be the kind of man who leaves a child without a dentist. I wrote a letter, not to her but to myself. In it, I listed consequences before I listed feelings. I froze the joint credit cards. I opened a separate checking. I set up my paycheck to deposit there. I removed my name from 2 shared subscriptions. I scheduled an appointment with a family lawyer whose office overlooks the courthouse where people with tidy outfits cry in hallways. I put the case numbers at the top of the page, PV-643,120 and BWL-22,097. I added a new notation for the state referral. I wrote that I would not share my new passwords. I said, in ink, that I would not co-sign anything else. Boundaries, people say, are love with a backbone. This felt like a spine I had not known I owned. The next twist came not from a person, but from paper. The county recorder's website had a scan of a home equity line of credit application under our address with my name and Mara's and a notary stamp from 8 months earlier. The bank had denied it, thank whatever quiet God watches the market, but the signatures had been enough to get past an underwriter to a final stage. The application included a scanned copy of my driver's license. The photo was mine, taken at the DMV on that winter day and the snapshot in my folder. I stared at the pixelation around the signature line until my eyes watered. I called the bank's road line. An agent with the kind of voice you trust when you are on the side of a freeway at night answered, took my statement, and gave me a new case number. HMNS 925,147. I added it to the page like I was writing a series of latitude and longitude coordinates. While the spool unraveled, another one caught. My primary care doctor had been nudging me for months to schedule a follow-up because my blood work had been off in a way that often means nothing but can also mean something you don't want it to. I had ignored her because chaos is a great excuse. I scheduled it because anger cannot keep your body upright forever. The new labs came back with numbers that were pressed at the edge of what counts as safe. The doctor suggested cutting stress, which was funny in the way of jokes told at funerals. She also said we should check a thing you would only check if you suspected a heavy metal exposure, thanks to a main break in our neighbourhood last year that had been remediated but now like a bad memory. I work at the Water Bureau. I know how the mitigation should work. I also know the comfort of numbers next to your name on a printout feels like control until it points the wrong way. Around this time, my phone plan showed an extra line had been added in the fall. A Galaxy 13, registered as belonging to a dependent. The usage was light, mostly calls to one number and a handful of texts at odd hours. The number matched a contact in my wife's phone labelled Ray. I had met Ray once at a Trident holiday potluck. She wore a cardigan embroidered with tiny orange flowers and talked to Mara with her head tilted in a way people tilt when they are listening to someone they have chosen to protect. People carry other people's lies out of love as often as malice. I try to remember this when I tally the damage. I reached out to Ray anyway. She answered, because I think some part of her wanted to surrender what she had been holding. She told me she had watched no 2 afternoons a week when shifts overlapped. She said she had believed Mara would tell me on a day when I was not tired. She said she had seen Gabrielle once in the parking lot carrying a box of diapers to Mara's car. The box had the same dates scribbled on the side as the ones in the storage unit. I thanked her. That is a phrase people use when they receive a truth that costs the giver something. Everything tilted fully out of pretense the following Saturday, at the birthday lunch we had planned weeks earlier for my mother at a restaurant on the Circle downtown where the streetcars rattle. I had warned my mother that she might see her daughter-in-law cry. I had not told her there might be a toddler. I packed the folder. I wrote a list of points in the notes app because I know how easily the brain fuzzes under pressure. I wanted the witnesses. I wanted sunlight and linen napkins and the clink of plates for ballast. We sat under Edison bulbs. I slid the benefit summary onto the table. I slid the birth certificate. I slid the badge logs. I did not raise my voice. I pointed out the date. I held the page open until it held us. My mother bit a corner of her lip the way she does when the dog eats the tulips. Mara's mother stared at the fork like it might explain something if she asked politely. Gabriel was not there. He did not belong to family lunches. What belonged was the realization that staying would be one version of lying and leaving would be another. My mother asked later, in the quiet in the parking lot, what I wanted. I said I wanted to not be the person who could be lied to that comprehensively. I sounded clinical because otherwise I would not have made it to my car. A week later, I wrote 2 letters. One I sent to the insurance company, formally requesting an audit and offering the documents I had collected. I included the temporary guardianship letter with the notary's signature, acknowledging its existence but noting that guardianship does not equal dependent status under the terms of the policy. I included a line that I had been advised by counsel to inform law enforcement if the audit indicated intentional fraud. The second letter went to Mara. It was not a letter to win a heart. It was a letter to put language where my boundaries lived. I asked for a written response in 5 days regarding a DNA test if she claimed the child was mine. I gave her a time and date at a clinic on Stonebridge, wrote that I would pay, and stated that failure to appear would be noted as a refusal consistent with my decision to file for separation. That sentence read like paperwork because I needed it to. On day 3, she left a note on the kitchen counter under the bowl where we tossed keys. It said that tests would only make things worse and that she had never wanted to hurt anyone. That sentence did not tell me whose child he was. It did tell me whose pain she had been counting. The independent confirmation of paternity came later from a stranger. The state worker handling the insurance audit called to ask for context in my report. In her calm voice, she explained that the dependence file included a hospital note from the birth record indicating unknown father and a notation that the mother had declined to list one. No DNA test would be necessary to know if I had been the father at birth. The audit had found enough to refer to this state. A separate voice from the bank called to say the HELOC case had been escalated. They had flagged our address to prevent applications for a year. The checkbooks on my legal pad next to protect to the extent possible felt as satisfying as it could in a life where satisfaction has a ceiling. Somewhere in here, my doctor called back with the metal exposure result. It was mildly elevated, likely residual from the break last year. I had to flush lines for a week and avoid water from the kitchen tap until we changed a filter. I imagined the water coursing under our street, under the yards with the neat flower beds and flags, carrying more than people want to think about. Systems fail in quiet ways, the same way marriages do. When people ask why I did not simply walk out with a bag and a toothbrush the minute I saw a toddler in a pediatric waiting room on my insurance, I want to ask them if they know where their checkbook is. I want to ask if they know their online banking password by heart, if they know who their spouse lists as their emergency contact at work. I did not walk out because the state prefers documented exits. I did not walk out because a child needed to see a dentist, even if I was the wrong person paying. The night I left like a person checking out of a hotel. The apartment I found was on the west side, above a laundromat on River Street that closes at 9 and leaves the faint smell of dry sheets in the stairwell. The landlords have a cat that wanders the hall like a sheriff. I brought a suitcase and 2 boxes I labeled kitchen and papers. I took the vacuum because I had bought it. I left the framed wedding photo on the hall table. I moved my toothbrush into a cheap ceramic cup and let it clink because the sound made it real. I told my mother. She asked if I had enough to eat. She asked if the couch was comfortable. She did not ask if I would try to forgive. She knows me better than the person in my wedding photo knew me when that photo was taken. The divorce attorney printed a stack of forms that thudded when they hit the conference table. Community property in our state divides fairly. Fairly is the softest word, for she takes half of what you thought was yours and you do the same. I laid out the fraud case numbers. I asked how to proceed without the state arriving at my door first. He suggested a clear timeline in the petition, an explicit statement that dependent misrepresentation had occurred without my knowledge or consent, and a motion to protect my credit. He gave me a sheet with steps like how to shut off the ability for new lines on my phone plan and how to alert the 3 credit bureaus with a fraud notice. He made the complicated simple. I paid him. I wrote the check numbers on the folder tab like a person in control. I notified Trident's HR in writing that I would not be responsible for her choices. They responded with a form letter that said they could not comment on employee matters but that dependent eligibility rules would be applied. The cube walls of that HR office held dozens of lives like mine in little, private compartments. I thought of the fruit tray and how the grapes had looked like someone had washed them in a hurry. It would be cowardly to pretend I am an unambiguous victim and she is a cartoon villain. When we married, I promised more than I delivered and she promised more than she could. We tried to make a house out of receipts and late shifts and the way the light hits the living room wall at 3 p.m. in winter. We rattled. Then we cracked. Then she found someone whose life curved into us like a river into a lake. Someone who understood the shape of her need the way I understand the shape of a leak. I keep replaying one night from the year everything started flickering. It was a Tuesday. She was late. I had made pasta with sauce from a jar and put out croutons as if they were a side dish. A man dropped a bag on our porch by mistake, and the Ring camera installed because of package theft showed me the whole thing. The man wore a hoodie and an expression like he had been awake too long. He bent down to pick up the bag and then left it when he realized the number did not match. Later, when I scrubbed the footage to see if the raccoon had knocked over the trash again, I saw that when he bent down, a car moved slowly at the end of the street and then stopped and waited. The taillights glowed red. The camera timestamp said 8:17 p.m. Our account said Parkline Suites at 8:39 p.m. That night passed without a fight because I did not ask anything. I add that to the math when I calculate fault. The last time I saw Noah, his hair had grown into a shaggy halo that stuck up in the back like a stubborn wave. He does not belong to me, not by law or blood, and yet the part of my brain that organizes groceries still puts applesauce pouches on the list sometimes. The child did not ask to be proof of anything. If I remove him from my insurance, which I did after 7 days, he still exists. My letter to the company included an ask that they assist the guardian in finding a plan. The state worker told me later, in a voice that tried to soften facts, that they had. The file would no longer reflect my name. The dental claims would be reprocessed. I angled my laptop so that the fish logo on Brightwave's portal would not look at me when I clicked out. People love endings. They want the clean arc where the wrongdoer gets fired, the helper gets free, the child finds a safe harbour, and the grey squares on the divorce papers feel neatly like Sudoku. My ending is a steady drip. Mur still lives in the house for now because the judge said stability counts for something until the property settles. I go back for my things in daylight with a list and a witness, usually my neighbour with the hydrangeas because she has become my reluctant notary of the ordinary. I do not linger. I do not sniff the towels. I take what belongs to me and leave small things I could fight over because it hurts less than fighting. Some nights I walk past Brightwave because my rental is 3 blocks away and the city designed a sidewalk to pull you past the river anyway. The waiting room goes dark at 7 except for the aquarium, which hums on a timer. The fish glow under the blue light and move the way fish move, like they have forgotten they were ever anywhere else. The pirate ship leans at the same angle. The filter burbles in a cadence my body now recognizes from a morning when a reminder landed like a hammer in a quiet house. If I could ask strangers for a verdict, I would ask them if the letters and case numbers and notarized forms amount to forgiveness or to the opposite of it. Would you wait to learn paternity until a child knows your name, or would you cut the line clean the minute an aquarium filter hums a frequency you cannot forget? I cannot answer that without sounding like I am trying to convince a jury of something I still do not fully understand. Last weekend my mother visited and brought me too many groceries and tucked a 50 into my coat pocket as if I am still 24 and about to drive cross country in a car that will not make it. She sat on my thin couch and looked out the windows into the alley where the laundromat neon buzzes. She asked what I planned to do with the walls. I said nothing for now. She said she had a recipe for a cake that does not require eggs. We ate the cake over paper towels and watched the city's shadow move over the roofline across the street. I keep the manila folder on my desk. The frontless case numbers in my meticulous block letters. PV-643,120. VWL-22,097. HM-925,147. The back has a sticky note that says call Dr. L about the filter, as if that reminder could be the one that announces everything. I circle the filters on my replacement schedule like a ritual. I flash the lines in the apartment and in my head. I know a plumbing analogy is a cheap trick for a water bureau guy, but it is the only way I have not to drown in metaphors. 2 mornings ago, my phone vibrated at 6:12 with the force of a small apology. Not a dental appointment this time. A fraud alert I had set, working as designed, catching an attempt at a card in a county I have never visited. I tapped deny. The alert asked me to confirm. The language was precise and steady, its comfort ridiculous in how much it meant. I slipped the phone into my pocket and poured coffee. In the glass of my apartment's only window, my reflection looked like a person who had made choices that might not make him a hero, but at least made him honest in the face of a very patent lie. When the aquarium lights cut on each morning at Brightwave, the fish glide out from behind the resin chip and begin their loops, the same paths mapped and remapped, the same curves that look new only to people not paying attention. I am learning to pay attention without turning into a camera. I am learning to freeze what must be frozen and let the water run until it clears. On the walk home after work, I stop outside the pediatric office and watch the blue glow for exactly 1 minute, not longer. Then I turn away before I start narrating a life that is not mine. The hum settles into my chest like a second, distant heart. It is not comfort. It is not terror. It is a sound I will always know. The same way I now know my own name on a form can be a door someone else walks through.